I am a consultant. I look after critically ill children. Siddhi mentioned the charity Healing Little Hearts, but for the last 17 years I've been doing another type of work which has really enlightened me and educated me, and that's the basis of my talk today. I work in what's called the appeal service or the independent tribunal service. And what that means is people with physical and mental health problems, disabilities, apply to the Department of Work and Pensions for benefits. They fill a fairly comprehensive form, add supplemental information, GP's letter, hospital letters, etc., etc. And the Department of Works and Pensions then decides whether this individual is entitled to this financial support from the government, from the Department of Work and Pensions, employment support allowance or personal independence payment. Now, for those who don't get the benefit, get rejected by the department, they have recourse to an appeal. And that's where I come in. I sit on what's called an appeal panel. It's an independent, Ministry of Justice-led, separate department panel. It's run up and down the country from north to south, and there are hundreds every day. Each panel consists of 3 people. A judge to make sure that the law is applied, a person with significant experience of disability, and a medical member to explore medical issues. Now, at this point, I want to declare a deep and vested interest in the subject of disability. When I was 6 years old, my mum, who was herself an occupational therapist, was involved in a near-fatal car accident. That left her severely handicapped. She was wheelchair-bound. She was dependent on others for care 24 hours a day, even for her basic toilet needs. Now, for those of you who believe in God or fate, or both, and I certainly do, having effectively had my mum taken away from me at the age of 6, I was blessed with 2 guardian angels. My mum's brother and his wife, who not only brought me up from the age of 6 with great love and affection, but selflessly looked after my mum for 42 years until she passed away 3 years ago, day and night. And the lady in the picture is the angel who brought me up. Now, with that in mind, I think it's the marker of any caring, self-respecting society to have a support system for those people with physical and mental disabilities, to be there for them in their time of need. It is just, it is right, it is fair. Indeed, we are the envy of many other parts of the world because of the support system that we have. And whilst the founding principles are laudable and are there to support these people in their time of need, somewhere along the way, we have lost our focus. And let me explain how. As I said, I have considerable experience over 17 years of sitting in these tribunals, and I want to take you over 2 case studies. The way it works is you sit in a tribunal room, which is a room, and it has a rectangular table, something like this. On one side of the table sits the appeal panel, the judge in the middle, the doctor, and the disability expert on either side. And opposite, just like these gentlemen are sitting, come the appellant or the person who's applied for benefits, family, and often a legal representative or a support worker. The way it starts is that the judge explains the proceeding, explains that we will be following the law as laid down by Parliament, and stresses it's a very informal procedure. It's basically question and answers. We're not trying to catch the person out. It's just exploring their physical and mental problems and understanding how they affect the individual. So I'm going to talk about one case study which is very representative of the hundreds of thousands of people we see in the tribunal service. He's a heavy-set, overweight, middle-aged man, about 60, comes in with a walking stick. We observe his gait. He's fairly mobile, a bit stiff, and he comes in clutching with a walking stick and takes a seat. After introductions are made, I then start to ask the questions. So I asked this gentleman what his medical problems are. He says he has backache, some arthritis. He also has diabetes, and he has high blood pressure. And then I talk about and explore his routine. So he drives 2 or 3 times a week. Indeed, that day he drove from somewhere in Leicestershire to the city centre where the tribunal service is, 20 miles. I was intrigued at that, and I asked him, so how was the drive? He said he has no problem. He drives a manual car. Indeed, his wife reiterated the fact that he's a very safe driver. She doesn't drive, and she trusts him implicitly. We then went to explore why he needed help. And the first thing he said to us was, he can't cook a meal. And we asked why. He said, because I once left the cooker on. Now, if that applied to the people in the room, all of you master chefs would never cook again. And yes, I know I'm being flippant, but just think about that for a minute. It's such a common occurrence. He left the cooker on once, there was no mishap, and yet he's not allowed to cook anymore. Point number 1. Complaint number 2, I can't make myself a hot drink. And also, I need to be reminded to take my medication. So we explored the second point. I asked him, I've seen you walking in with a walking stick. You clearly have a very powerful grip. If you think about it, he's a fairly heavy-set man. He needs to have a strong grip to keep himself upright with the help of the walking stick. And I asked him, have you ever dropped the walking stick? And he said, no. I said, have you ever fallen down? And he said, no. Yet his wife doesn't let him make himself a hot drink. And I also asked him, so why do you need, since backache is your big problem, why do you need to be reminded to take pain medicine? He looked at his wife and he said, she gives it to me. Meanwhile, his legal representative who was sitting by him was nodding vigorously. These are all the things that this gentleman cannot do. And in one fell swoop, we've taken this man who has some understandable age-related problems and completely disabled him. Because what he does now, thanks to his, in inverted commas, caring family, he sits in a chair all day long watching daytime television. Meanwhile, his weight has gone up considerably, his diabetes is worse, his high blood pressure is higher, and he's literally a sitting duck for either a heart attack or a stroke. In addition, he's sitting in his chair all day long watching daytime television, he's complaining of memory loss, and he's depressed. The best personal independence plan for somebody like that is exercise. And lest you think I'm a right-wing Tory, let's look at the evidence. There's plenty of evidence. By the decade, we're getting more and more. I've just picked out 2 random studies. One was an overview published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine in 2014, looking at all the literature, reviewing all the research, which says quite starkly, low amounts of moderate intensity exercise at regular intervals during the week reduces mortality in over 60s by 22%. At another healthcare symposium in no less an august medical school, Harvard Medical School, called Healthy Mind and Healthy Body, it stated very clearly there are decades of solid science which reiterate the fact that exercise is important and crucial to improve your health and extend living. Let's talk about the next case study. A 42-year-old lady walks in and she complains of panic attacks, anxiety and depression. She has difficulty interacting with strangers. She can't open the doorbell when it rings and she doesn't like answering the phone, lest she gets a panic attack. That letter is the letter from the community psychiatric nurse, and it outlines all the various problems I've discussed and reiterates how serious they are. While going through the paperwork, I noticed that she lives alone. Time to invoke Hippocrates. Hippocrates lived between 460 and 370 BC. He said, man is a social animal. Man cannot exist without other people. Man is dependent on others to lead a fulfilled life. And more recently, existentialism, which says each individual, not society, not religion, is responsible for them leading full, authentic, sincere, and passionate lives. Back in the tribunal service, we carry on questioning this lady. And we have a whole list of things that this lady cannot do related to her mental health problem. Curiously, she gave 3 complete strangers, the judge, the doctor, and the person with disability expertise, a very graphic and vivid account of what she couldn't do. She spoke very comfortably to 3 strangers, and that was very curious. Now, to prove the point that these are the most common conditions we see in the Department of Works and Pensions and the Appeal Service, this data, this statistic is from the Department of Work and Pensions. If you look at the bar graph, it shows that the most common diagnosis of people applying for financial support is anxiety and depression. And then you have a various plethora of musculoskeletal problems. If you look at the list, you will see number 4 is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Number 8 is rheumatoid arthritis. Number 10 and 11, which are not on the list, are schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. In other words, the vast majority of people applying for financial support from the Department of Work and Pensions have musculoskeletal, psychosomatic problems. The other problem is, I think society makes matters worse. And that's partly because of the terminology we use. We say these people have complex problems. And what do you do when you say that somebody has a complex problem? You're telling somebody who's functioning at a suboptimal level that actually your problems are so difficult that you're never going to overcome them. These are not complex problems. As far as I'm concerned, they're very straightforward. These problems are related to unemployment, family breakdown, with a common thread of social isolation. In this country, and indeed in the West, we have a social famine in lands of plenty. And that is a tragedy. Then, of course, we use the word vulnerable. Yes, of course, people are vulnerable. But we use it so glibly, frequently, inappropriately, that we badge these people as vulnerable, once again reinforcing the victim mentality. And complex and deprivation, the same thing. We're reinforcing to these people that they have these serious problems out of which they will never recover. Not just to the people, but the support structure around them. We are disabling them further. And whilst I'm having a dig, I'm going to have a dig at my psychiatric colleagues. I don't know if there are any in the audience. I think the psychiatrists medicalize everything. So somebody who has difficulty dealing with circumstances in life and issues, and we all do to a certain extent, is called somebody with an adjustment disorder. Somebody who has a bit of a short fuse, a bit of a hot temper, gets into trouble with the neighbors and occasionally the police, is called a personality disorder. Now, what happens when you label somebody like that? Once again, you're reinforcing that they've got serious problems. You're not helping them get better, you're impeding their recovery. And not only do they think they have a serious problem, the people around them who are supposed to support them also think the same and mollycoddle them. Don't even start me on the word stress. We glamorize stress. You know, we talk about stress like we talk about the weather, like we talk about Leicester City Football Club, cricket, the royal family, etc. As far as I'm concerned, I'm sorry, stress is not knowing where your next meal is going to come from. Stress is not having a roof over your head. Stress is wondering if your close family member or indeed you have a life-threatening condition. I have parents bringing their 8 and 9-year-old children to my clinic and asking, is little Johnny stressed? And I look at them and gasp, are you serious? We've totally glamorized and overused the word stress to the detriment of society. And as a result of all these and many more factors, anxiety and depression are at epidemic levels in the West, in spite of a massive increase in the use of antidepressants. They have made not a dent on the massive increase in anxiety and depression. As I said, social famine amongst lands of plenty. There is hope. There is strong evidence that depression can be prevented and treated by TLC, not the tender, loving, or misguided care that was demonstrated in the 2 case studies, but actually a therapeutic lifestyle change. And 70% of those who follow this therapeutic lifestyle change have experienced a 50% reduction in the symptoms. The various tenets to this therapeutic lifestyle change, it's very simple. And the headlines are anti-rumination strategies. When you're sitting on your own at home, brooding, thinking negative thoughts, there is a Formula One race of negative circuitry that's going round in your brain. The chemicals, the negative chemicals abound and only compound the problem. When you're sitting at home brooding, you need to reach out, reach for the telephone, go outside. I read an interesting article which said that people who joined drumming lessons had a 30% reduction in their anxiety and depression. No, that's not for everybody, of course, but the weather was good all the weekend. Go outside. There's plenty of evidence that light treatment, sunlight, which not only gives you vitamin D, is a very good antidepressant. This is backed by very sound science. Even in winter, the seasonal affective disorder, we do get sunlight. The sun does peer through the cloud. We must go outside for fresh air, but people are not advised to do that. Like this lady who I discussed, she's been at home like that for 19 years. I can guarantee you she will never get better. And then she will develop physical problems and her life will be tragically curtailed. We are not doing her any favors, we're disabling her further. Exercise. Exercise is not a four-letter word. Exercise is medicine, and it increases the amount of dopamine, the serotonin, the good chemicals in the body which uplift people, and of course is good for the cardiovascular system, etc. Social connection. Invoking Hippocrates and existentialism again, just think of what happens to an animal that is separated from its herd. It withers and dies. So why are human beings any different to that? This is curious. Another august body, health and safety, which started off in great principles, but I think has now become a cancer. But the passing chief, the chief exec who's leaving said herself, we have reached a point where people expect to be looked after. We need to take some responsibility for ourselves and decide what is risky and what is not. We're mollycoddling people too much. So what's the way forward? Enabling. Education in school, not just about exercise, but about social connection, society and the role it plays. I'm very fearful for our children with regards to technology. There's been a massive explosion. So the way I look at it is, we have the intelligence as a human race to send a probe to Pluto, but we do not have the maturity to know how to deal with it. I read an article the other day about a shoelace that ties itself. Where is this going to stop? I mean, it's just getting beyond a joke. We are disempowering ourselves and disabling ourselves, and we're creating these virtual communities. It's very sad. A pip for a pip. What do I mean by that? A personal independence plan for the personal independence payments. The personal independence payment is the financial support the government is rightly giving to these people with physical and mental health problems. However, they give this money to these people and have no idea where it's used, have no idea whether it's used for any therapy or not. So what do I mean by that? Somebody with physical problems like the gentleman I described, if he's given money, that money should get him a taxi ride to the gym or to the park or to the swimming pool. There should be a clear audit trail. If somebody with mental health problems, like the lady I described, is given money, as she should be, the money should be used to get a taxi to a voluntary group, to a charitable organization, to get her out of the house. The government should be very clear what the financial support is available for. Smart cards that allow you to take access of activities and aids. And the National Audit Office should look at this. There should be a paradigm shift as to how we're looking after these people, from the current passive recipients to make sure and ensure they're active participants in their own recovery. And to modify what John F. Kennedy says, ask not what society can do for you, ask what you can do for yourself. Thank you.